welcome to Bookish and Unbalanced, the podcast that is all about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful of mental health in the queer book community. I'm Adrienne J. Smith.
I'm Amy Spencer.
And I'm Katie Trapp.
So from authors, editors, publishers, readers, reviewers, and soon-to-be narrators, we all have a state of mental health, and we neglect talking about it. Or worse yet, we are ashamed to talk about it. So let's break that stigma. On today's episode, we are interviewing the author, Jay. So, hi, Jay.
Hi.
Can you just begin by telling us a little bit about yourself and an overview for people who don't know who you are?
Okay. I've been a writer for pretty much my entire life since I was, 10 or so. A published author for 15 years, and I'm celebrating my 10th years anniversary as a full-time writer in December. I write sapphic romance and have published 23 of them. The 24th will be out in January. And I write across all subgenres of romance, from contemporary, paranormal, historical, and a few romantic suspense. And in addition to being a writer, I'm also an editor. And I translate my own work from English into German, which is my native language. And I'm a strong believer in community and giving back to it, which means I take on projects, cross-promoting with other authors or planning big events. And you can imagine all of that adds up to my work-life balance. Well, let's just say it's a work in progress.
I think it is for everybody.
Yeah.
So I know that you've had a career in mental health prior to becoming a full-time writer. Would you maybe talk about that a little bit? What got you started in that direction and what exactly your role was?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think most of us don't really grow up thinking that being a full-time writer, actually making a living from it, is like a realistic career choice. We all have this image of the starving artist, and especially like once I discovered, okay, I figured out I'm a lesbian and what I really want to write is sapphic romance, which is a small niche. You don't really think, okay, this is what I'm gonna do with my life. But luckily I was also interested in people and understanding what makes people tick and what shapes them and how to help them live a better, more authentic life. And so I went to university and studied psychology. And my area of psychology that I worked in is a little unique because it doesn't exist in other countries. In Germany, we have what is called traffic psychology. And what that means is that if people lose their driver's license because either they were driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs, or they had repeated or severe traffic infractions, they don't just get their driver's license back once a certain time has passed. They have to undergo counseling and evaluation in order to get a driver's license back. So my role was therapeutic, yes, but not like a usual therapist where patients are usually a little bit more cooperative because they come voluntarily and ask for help, while most of my clients, 90% of them were men, and a huge percentage of them did not think that they needed a psychologist. Things that I typically heard was something like, I'm not crazy, I don't need a psychologist. So that was their understanding of psychology. So you can imagine it was difficult to get started. So that was my area of expertise. And I did one-on-one sessions and group sessions. As I said, mostly with men. So very different from what I'm doing now.
We have talked on the podcast several times just about the difference in psychology in different countries, with Amy being from the UK, and when we interviewed Jack Clean, we talked about that a little bit, and I think with Catherine too. And so it's always interesting to me to look at the different countries and see how the processes are different. Amy, was it you that made the comment about how Americans are over psychologized?
I think it's like every American seems to have a therapist or go to therapy, like, and are very open about it. Like, it's just very like a natural part of their, you know, schedule, I guess. Like, you know, oh, what am I doing today? Oh, I've got to go, you know, I've got to go my grocery shopping and pick up something in town and see my therapist. And like, you would not get that in the UK at all. Like, it's not as readily available, and I don't think, and it's definitely not as readily spoken about. Like, it's just not as ingrained in part of our society and our lives as much as it is in the States. Is it, you know, is it like, where does Germany kind of like fall in that spectrum?
I think we are much more, we have more of a British attitude to therapy. I think it's not yet normalized. It's starting to become a little bit more normalized, but still, yeah, it's not like in the US where it's part of self-care, like going to the gym. I wish it were, but we are not there yet. So yeah, it's more of a rare thing. It's also not easy to get a good therapist. Like, to find any therapist is not easy. Even though you would think the German healthcare system is great. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely grateful for it, and especially compared to the US. But you have a waiting list of 2 or more years to find a good therapist. So it's not like you can just be like this and you have a therapist. So,
and I was thinking about something, like, we were talking the other day about the availability of therapists as well. And I think it was you, AJ, who said something like, you'd spoken to someone else in the UK and they were like, oh yeah, we get like 9 sessions, and like, that's like nowhere near enough. And afterwards I was thinking about it, and I think a lot of that is to do with our healthcare system and how it's set up. Like, you know, again, it has its flaws, but there's a lot of great things about it. The primary one is that it's a free healthcare service, but because it's free, then they put a limit on things. So like, those 9 sessions are what you're going to get free, and then you all of a sudden find yourself in a position where you've probably not even really started to explore anything which you really need to talk about. You've probably not even kind of really built up any sort of relationship with the person that you're seeing, and then you're faced with the decision as to, well, if you want to continue, then you're going to have to start paying for it or finding someone else. And I think it's kind of like one of those things where I think in the UK it's given kind of like, well, we're just going to like give you this tiny little tester. Like, here's a little teaser of what you could have.
I think the problem is they're treating psychology as if it were like a medicine that, you know, like antibiotics. You take them a certain number of times and that's how the human body reacts to it, and you will be fine. And they are not taking into account that it doesn't work like that. Or, I mean, some people might be fine with those 9 sessions, but a lot won't, you know. So I think the entire healthcare system is stuck into treating everything as if everyone worked the same, you know, every mind works the same and every person is the same, because in medicine, even though it's not true for medicine either, but it's more true than it is for psychology. So
yeah, and we've talked about the different kinds of therapy too, right? Like talk therapy is really big in the UK. It's huge here as well, but I think we're starting to develop different kinds of therapy, which I'm thankful for, because I don't like talk therapy and it doesn't work very well with me. But when I was getting my master's degree in divinity, because pastoral care and counseling is a huge part of that, but I'm not a psychologist by any means. One of the things that we studied was short-term narrative counseling, which I, as an author, love and adore, because the whole part of it is like, try to find the plot to your life that you want to be the main plot. and all these other subplots that you don't really care so much about. So there are definitely kinds of therapy that work in that short term, but again, not all therapy works for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the thing, you know, like if healthcare only pays for one thing and you try it and it wasn't what works for you, then you're stuck.
You touched on it earlier, about, you know, hiring and firing therapists, and it's kind of like a bit like dating people, and you were saying that your clients were court ordered to attend. How do you feel that hindered their healing, or do you feel like it you touched on it when you said that they felt like they shouldn't be there, or they're not crazy?
Yeah.
And how did you work around that in terms of trying to you know, achieve what was required?
Yeah, well, to use your metaphor of dating, you know, like dating a therapist or finding the right match, some of them, they didn't really want to date, you know. So it's very different from working as a therapist who actually has patients who actually want to work with them. The way it was set up is that patients came in for a one-time 1 hour session. That was the initial situation. And in that hour, I was supposed to do an assessment of what do they need, and then convince them that this is what they need. And because they saw me as, I was the enemy, you know, like I was an extension of the law that they saw as out to get them. So I was faced with a lot of anger. They were angry at the court, at the police, at the entire system, and they were in denial, a lot of aggression. Yeah, that probably doesn't sound much like dating, right? At least not a very functional relationship. So the goal was to get a very fast, because it's like 50 minutes, you don't have a lot of time, you need to assess a lot of things about who is this person, what is the problem, what do they need to do, and how do I need to get them there. So it wasn't easy. It's definitely a job with a high burnout rate. The kind of trick was to see how much can I challenge their worldview. Will that cause them to withdraw completely and never return? Or will that kind of open a door? But if they were convinced their only problem is, I don't have my driver's license, then you need to work with that. If they're not ready to say, yeah, and maybe I have an alcohol problem, then you need to work with where they are, you know. And I think as the therapist, it was my role to make myself fit, because they certainly weren't willing to do it. Not, to use that metaphor, not something that you should do in a romantic relationship, you know, where it needs to be a mutual give and take. But in that situation, in that 1 hour that I had, it was about me fitting to where they were, to start them moving down that process.
But you, am I remembering correctly that you said you've also done group therapies?
Yeah, the goal was to get them to go into more regular sessions, you know. And with some you were successful. I would say I was successful more often than I wasn't. But in that job, you had to accept very quickly that you can't reach everyone. If they are not ready to get over that anger and aggression, and they are just so completely in denial that they won't take that step, then you can't work with them. They won't show up for a second session. But the goal was to use that 1 hour to convince them, give it a try, come to group session, or depending on the situation or their personality, it was either one-on-one sessions, maybe once a week or so, or the group sessions. And yeah, the group were challenging too, because everyone was in a different point. Someone had their first session, someone else was in their 5th, the other were in their 10th session. So it really kept you on your toes. Yeah.
Well, and group sessions are challenging anyway, because you have
Yeah.
a ton of personalities in one room. And
yeah, and it was the dynamic was like, when I was starting out in that job, I was in my mid-20s, working with usually men who were all older than me, some twice as old as me, as my clients, 15 men and me. So that was the and that was a very interesting dynamic. It taught me a lot, but it was a job. I'm not sure I would have wanted to do it for 30 years. Most of my colleagues did it part-time. I was the only one doing it full-time. It was very rewarding if you could really, you change lives, literally, you know. But it was also, you were the target of a lot of anger and aggression at first.
That sounds similar to what I did with addiction counseling. It was me, and we were nonprofit and state funded, and probably about 80% of the men there were court ordered.
Mm-hmm.
So they did not want to be there, and they had to stay there for 30 days, eat, sleep, attend groups. And a lot of times it was just this balance of not only having to deal with, you know, some would rub off on other ones, but then they never, I had to prove myself every time a new batch of loud clients came in, the really opinionated ones, because it's like,
Yeah.
What is this woman telling me? I'm old enough to be your dad. And it's like, okay,
exactly,
well, we're
like
not
that.
doing that. We have to, we're not going to spoil the whole bunch. And that was very hard to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It sounds like it has a lot of overlap. I would say most of my patients weren't quite yet addicted to alcohol, but they were heavily abusing it and really like this close before it would have become a physical addiction. And for some, it already was. So, yeah. And then we had a couple of people who were either in addition or instead of alcohol, abused or were addicted to drugs. And to make it even more interesting, people who didn't drink alcohol and didn't use drugs, but they had a heavy dysregulation of emotions, and it showed in their driving style. So they were constantly breaking traffic laws, and all of these people in one group. So it really was a challenge.
well, changing topic slightly to writing, like you did. You moved obviously from a profession in mental health to becoming a full-time writer. So have you found, and I strongly suspect there is, so I'm more curious what the crossover has been between working in psychology, studying psychology, and then in the writing world and playing with made-up characters.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a huge overlap. I don't feel that I left psychology at all. First, as a writer, I mean, developing characters, making up their backstory. And I mean, I write romance, and that means I create an emotional wound, a dysfunctional belief, or some other flaw that they have to overcome, both of them, another one, in order to get their happy ending together. And then the book is taking them through that process of change, and that's so much like therapy, you know. It's basically identical. Yeah, so I feel like that part, my background as a psychologist really helps. And then, I mean, I'm not just a writer, I'm also an editor, and I work with other writers either as a mentor or when I'm organizing cross promotions. And I mean, you probably noticed, and that's the reason why you established a podcast. So many writers struggle with mental health issues, anxiety, depression, imposter syndrome, PTSD, you name it. I actually think I'm one of very few writers that I know who doesn't have any diagnosed mental health issue. Plus, so many people in the LGBTQ community are neurodivergent in one or several ways. So I feel, okay, psychology is definitely something that I'm grateful to have as a background, because I think it makes it a little easier to treat everyone in the way that they need to be comfortable, you know.
What was it like to shift from, since you say that there's like a lot of similarities, what was the process like from shifting from full-time writer to full-time writer, and how did that affect you mentally though? Like,
I mean, I always wanted to write full-time, but for a long time didn't really think it was a viable choice. But then when it started to, okay, yeah, maybe it is possible. I mean, it was still a leap of faith, but I didn't actually leap, because I know myself. I'm more of a, I need a certain security, you know. I'm not jumping in if I'm not convinced it will work out. That's a huge decision. Once you give up your day job, I'm not so sure, like now I couldn't go back. I'm out of that job for too long. So it was a huge risk. And for me, that meant I put in a lot of planning. I knew a year in advance that I wanted to give up my day job. And I did have to give notice a long time, so I could train my replacement. And I wanted to build up like a financial cushion, because yeah, as a full-time writer, 1 month it's going well because you have a new release, and then suddenly it's not going so well. You don't really have a secure income. So that was one thing I had to do to ease into it and to ease my mind. For me, I already knew I would be pretty good with the time management that I know some people struggle with, and goal setting and managing your own time when you work from home. Thankfully, as a psychologist, I was already used to being a freelancer and being self-employed and managing my own time, so that part thankfully wasn't a problem. What I did have to do, and that was a bit of a struggle in the beginning, is learn how to set much firmer boundaries with my family and friends, because I used to work outside of the home. So when I'm not there, no one can just call me and think I'm there to run errands. But when you work from home, for some reason, people think you're not really working. And so I had to abuse them of that notion and establish very clear rules that no one can call before 8 p.m. Because I'm working and not sitting on the couch or whatever they think a writer is doing. Yeah, so that was a little bit of a struggle, but I think by now I established that rule. One thing that was a little strange in the beginning is you no longer have co-workers, you know. I used to be part of a team of psychologists and medical doctors. So just like a 5-minute chat when you're on break is no longer happening. So I tried to establish a network for myself of beta readers and friends who are supportive, and especially writers who knows how it is as a writer, your daily struggles, your struggles with your word count or storyline where you don't know how to continue. I think that's important to have people who get the situation. And like all writers, I struggle with the marketing. I think Germans in particular, we are taught like, oh no, don't brag about your stuff, and marketing feels very much like bragging, you know, like we are taught you have to be modest and yeah. So, and I'm very introverted and pretty shy, so putting myself out there, that took some getting used to. Public speaking is still pretty much terrifying for me, especially, I mean, it's not my native language, so I always feel a little bit at a disadvantage. Yeah, mostly I got used to it. I also drew the line at some things where I'm like, okay, going out of my comfort zone a little is a great thing, but going out of my comfort zone 5 miles, that's to me, not worth it. That's not healthy either, because it just takes up too much energy. Like, one thing I refuse to do is readings. I don't have a talent for it, and they terrify me. If you told me I had to do a reading next week, I probably wouldn't get anything done the entire week. So it's just not helping my productivity. So I'm just not doing readings.
I think too, just being the face of marketing is really hard, especially when you're starting with marketing as a newer author, because so much of what they tell you to do for marketing is social media, and that's only like one chunk of it, but it's the chunk that everybody sees, so it's the chunk that everybody knows that happens. And I'm not sure that's such a German thing to be like, don't brag about yourself, because I hear that
it's okay.
Like everybody, but it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, I have to talk about my book. What are you talking about?
Yeah, and again, there's the expectation that everyone has to do the same stuff, like you have to be on TikTok. No, I don't. You have to market your book. That's true. I mean, if you don't, who's gonna do it for you? It doesn't matter if you're an indie author or with a publisher. Your publisher can promote your books as well as you can. And I learned to kind of reframe marketing, because it's not like I'm selling people something they don't want or they don't need. Like, I believe in my books, and I just want to share the good news with my readers. And I learned to avoid my weaknesses and go with my strengths. Like, I do a lot of events that they are promotion, but they are also fun for me and fun for readers. And I think if I can do it that way, then it's actually a good thing, and doesn't feel like I'm bragging all over social media, or like, if I'm not so great with video, that's okay. Then I can find something else I'm good at. Like, I'm very organized. I deal well with people. So I do cross promotions, and so that, I think the thing is to find what works for you, and not just do what everyone tells you. You have to do this. If it's absolutely something you're not good at or you can't do, then find something else.
Yeah, I hated marketing as well. And I think once I reframed it to how can I get creative within marketing, right? Because we're obviously all creative people, being writers and being in the book community. And once I reframed it to how can I get creative in this in a way that I enjoy it, it became a lot more enjoyable. And I did a lot more of it because it was enjoyable. And yeah, because don't get me started on TikTok or Threads or Mastodon. No, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it works for some people. If it fits their personality or their style, that's great. So I think it's just, to try different things and to see what's your thing. Yeah.
You were talking about, and you mentioned earlier about other things that you do in the book community, and you do a lot of extra things in the Sapphic book community, which we're all very grateful for. But do you ever feel like you get overwhelmed by it? And is it balanced by like any sort of reward which you see when people react to those things that you do and you put out there?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, it is sometimes I bite off a little bit too much. I have so many ideas, like Adrian, like you said, I'm a creative person, and that creativity doesn't end with writing. I see things, events I want to do. Oh, I could do this, I could do that. And yeah, like right now I'm planning the Sapphic book advent calendar. And so, of course, I'm like, okay, my English language speaking readers, they now have an advent calendar, but what about the people who don't speak English, like my German readers? They want something too. So now I have 2 advent calendars, and there's a total of, I think, over 65 authors involved. And so that's a lot of details I need to keep track of. At the same time, there's the next year's reading challenge that has 400 or so authors are involved. Yeah, my inbox is a mess. Yeah, it's and I have to get some writing done, because as fun as these events are, I'm not getting paid. I'm not a promotion company. So I also have to get some writing done. And maybe then also do some editing. So it really is a lot. Like, my to-do list is never ending. It also can become a little frustrating, because working with so many authors, they are great. But as I said, a lot of them are neurodivergent. So I get a lot of emails from people who forgot what book did I enter into the giveaway. You know, like little details, and I really don't mind, but it adds up. So it's a lot of work. Some authors don't understand that these are big projects. Like, I'm not planning them like 2 days in advance. These are planned months in advance. I need to build the websites and everything and make sure everything works. So if they are coming 2 days before the event and they want me to put their book in, that's not, I can't make it happen. It's already all set. So yeah, it's just a lot. Like, I could use at least 2 assistants who help me handle all of that, but yeah, I just don't have the money for it. So yeah, it is really a lot. That said, I feel like the rewards, they really outweigh all the stress that it can cause. For the advent calendar in particular, the last year when I did it the first time, I heard from so many people. I feel like, probably because we are part of the LGBTQ community, there are so many people for whom it's not just a happy season. A lot of people are struggling. They might not have a lot of friends, or they are not in touch with the family, or it's very stressful for them because they lost someone. And I heard from so many readers who said the advent calendar was the only thing that got them out of bed in the morning. It gave them something to look forward to. And it's really humbling, you know, to hear something like that, that such a relatively small thing. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's still nothing that you think of as life-changing. And to hear that in a way you are touching someone's life and changing it in a little way, that to me, that makes it worth it, all the work and the stress that goes into it. So yeah, I find it very rewarding. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think a lot of people understand how much work goes into it, for sure. Because I think you emailed like at the beginning of November, it might have even been October, asking for people to submit. I think it might have been October, asking for people to submit to add to the Advent. And I'm sitting there going, and you were probably starting planning that in August. And just coming from my side, first off, I love the fact that it's actually Advent, because it really bugs me when people do the 12 days of Christmas and it's before Christmas. And I'm like, the 12 days of Christmas are after Christmas, and you're just driving me up a wall. Yeah, that's my public service announcement for the day, is the 12 days of Christmas start on December 26th. But like, just coming from my job, because it is so Advent heavy, that's what I begin the marathon, that I call it. Like, I start planning that in August. So I imagine you were starting to plan it then too. And just the amount of work, I think your email said something like 280 books were submitted for it, at least for the English side of it. And then I saw you were doing the German one, and I was like, she's crazy, but it's fine.
Yeah, I felt like, okay.
But I was excited. Yeah. I thought that there was enough German translations to even do one. Like, that's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's not all just translations. There are also like a lot of originals. In the German, I didn't have so many submissions. I had to actually search for enough submissions, so that it was the opposite problem. I'm more well connected in the English language market. I mean, all of my writer friends are either Americans or English speaking. in Germany, people aren't used to networking. German authors aren't used to networking. It's a very different industry over there. So yeah, I found enough authors who wanted to participate, also with the help of some translations, like American or English speaking people who have a book out in German. But it was the opposite problem, which is so interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And it's interesting that you said Germans aren't used to networking. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that my secretary at my day job is German. She's from East Germany, and she is like the biggest networker on the planet.
And I didn't mean that Germans in general, but I mean, the reason why I started writing in English was because there was zero network, no community, nothing. There was no sapphic fiction community, and there still is very little to speak of. It's not like we have so many Facebook groups and you know, newsletters, and someone is like the I Heart Sapphic or My Queer Sapphic, you know, like there's so much structure there, people you can reach out to, and there's not that much of a German, like there are like maybe 1 or 2 Facebook groups, but they are mostly for readers, and everyone is just doing their own thing. So
well, and 15 years ago when you started publishing, it was similar to, I've been publishing 10 years, and I remember there not being much of a sapphic community. Like we were just kind of starting to form it.
Yeah, but then it was all in fan fiction, you know, that's where the community was, and it grew from there. That's how I feel. And then maybe because we didn't really have that much fan fiction in German, it just didn't develop.
Yeah, I don't know, that'd be an interesting study to do. We'll find somebody else to do it, Will.
Not gonna take that on.
Yeah, no, also not my area of expertise by any means to collect that amount of data and sort through it. So we're pretty much at the rapid fire. Are you ready for it?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever answer comes first to mind. So, what is your favorite source of caffeine?
A latte with a lot of milk.
A latte with a lot of milk, isn't a latte? AJ knows what that's saying now.
No,
a latte is basically.
I have to, like, for normal people, it's milk with coffee. What other people name latte is, to me, too much coffee, too little milk.
It's laughing because I'm the same way, because I'm like, I don't drink coffee and I have to get a chai tea so that it doesn't taste like coffee, because I can't do
Simply.
so I have to mask it in order to drink it. And Amy's like, that's not coffee. And I'm like, I know it's not, because I don't want coffee. That's why they're laughing. They make fun of me.
I think a latte is just warm milk that was once shown a coffee bean. That's how much like coffee it's not.
Exactly. The bean was just passing through.
Okay, now that we've had that giggle, what is your dream destination vacation?
Croatia, Spain, anywhere where there's an ocean.
Where did you see kindness today?
My website crashed yesterday, and we had to spontaneously move to a new provider, and there was a lot of work still involved this morning, and my roommate did most of it so that I could write.
What is your philosophy on good mental health?
Don't follow my example, no. I think that to know yourself and to know what you need to have a good emotional balance, and that might not be what's right for someone else.
And where did you find joy this week?
I'm looking forward to tomorrow, because a new cat cafe opened up in my city, and I booked a table for tomorrow to have brunch with my sister.
We have a cat cafe in town, which is shocking because our town is really tiny. And I have not been, but I'm very intrigued to go. So you have to tell me how it went.
Yeah.
What is the cat cafe?
You go, it's like a cafe, and then there's cats, and they come in
with cats.
You can play with them.
Yeah.
I'm going to Google that.
Yeah.
Find one.
I mean, there are cat cafe romances. Like I want to write one day, so maybe I can offset the brunch from my taxes.
It's research.
Yeah, it's research. Yeah, yeah. And since I love cats, but I can't have one, so cat cafe is.
Yeah,
Happy meeting.
that's my biggest hesitation in going, is that my daughter is allergic to cats and I don't want to go and then come home drenched in cat, because I love cat and I will roll around with them.
Yeah,
Not be able to touch my daughter, and she's 5, so she will not understand that.
yeah. It's the same with my roommate, so I have to kind of put everything in the washing machine and kind of build like an airlock.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, that's all for our latest episode of Bookish and Unbalanced. We would love to thank Jay for sharing with us today. We also want to thank our listeners for tuning in and getting to know Jay. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to keep up to date with our latest episodes. Until then, take care out there, and remember, we are all in this together.
And now we go.
Oh.